All right. Thank you for joining us for National NISLA's office hours, first jobs, clinical fellowships, and beyond. National NISLA's Office Hours is a live event series designed to bring students and professionals together to talk about topics that are relevant and important to current students. My name is Haley Carrasco, and I serve as National NISLA's Vice President for Programming in Speech Language Pathology. I'm a first year SLP student at the University at Buffalo. I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight, my executive council partner, Katie.
Thanks so much, Haley. So, my name is Katie Kingsbury, and I serve as National NISLA's Vice President for Programming in Audiology. I'm a third year AUD and PhD student at the University of Iowa. And so, my role tonight, I'll really be monitoring any questions you ask throughout the night, which we want you to do through the Q&A box on the Zoom toolbar. So try to keep those questions out of the chat feature and really put them in the Q&A box so we can best answer them.
Before we get started, we would like to take a few minutes to thank our sponsor, SPG Therapy and Education, for their support of this event. I'd like to invite Jana Gray from SPG to share a few words.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you for this special NISLA event. My name is Janet Gray, and I'm a director and speech language pathologist with SPG Therapy and Education. And I'd love to tell you just a little bit about us. So, SPG Therapy and Education is a non-public agency that started in California. Our founder, who is an SLP, began running a small private practice in the Bay Area back in 1989, and it has now grown to one of the most highly respected multidisciplinary providers in California and beyond now. We are a clinician-led team who believes that services should be accessible, inclusive, and empowering. And as we continue to grow, we really do strive to maintain that small company feeling with a thoughtful and nurturing approach that's devoted to caring for our therapists and clients. We are passionate about supporting SLPs and SLPAs no matter where they find themselves in their career. And we especially love supporting students and new clinicians to the field. For example, our Compass program is dedicated specifically to those in their clinical fellowship year in the schools, full of themed office hours, dedicated resources, and networking and community opportunities. We are also regularly partner with universities and student clinicians to support this next generation to the field. We're really grateful for our partnership with National NISLA, and I'm just excited for us to jump into this important topic. So I'll pass it back to Haley.
Thank you so much, Jana. At National NISLA, we understand that applying and interviewing for clinical fellowships is a rewarding, yet long and sometimes difficult process. Between crafting resumes and cover letters and preparing for interviews, applicants can find themselves feeling overwhelmed. National NISLA wanted to offer a way for students in the clinical fellowship application process to seek advice from professionals who have firsthand experience. During tonight's office hours, we'll hear from CSD-related professionals with experience on the hiring side of the application process. Although we've developed a few questions for the panelists, this event is meant to be an open discussion, so please feel free to add some questions in the Q&A feature found on the Zoom bar. You can also feel free to add some comments in the chat. We're fortunate to have a panel of professionals who took time out of their very busy schedules to help us prepare for the clinical fellowship application process. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panel of professionals. Michael Campbell, Jana Gray, whom you just met, Dr. Ryan Lee James, Mary Louise Nichols, Michelle Summers, and Kennedy Wilkins. Please introduce yourselves and include your discipline and place of employment.
First on the slide, so I guess I'll go first. My name is Michael Campbell. I work as a speech language pathologist. I have my own small staffing agency and private practice. I also work in the schools. I lead a team of about 60 SLPs there as a co-lead and evaluator. And then I also teach sometimes at the University of New Mexico, supervising students or teaching courses. I'm really excited to be here and share what I think I know.
Hi again, everyone. As I mentioned, I am a director and also a speech language pathologist. A lot of my background has been in the school setting, a little bit in the clinics as well. My main role at SPG currently is I support a lot of our Southern California speech language pathologists and SLPAs as well. And then I do regularly work with our mentoring program. So the Compass program that I mentioned, that is specifically for our clinical fellows. And then I get to chat a lot with students and university events. So I'm really excited to be chatting today.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Lee James, and I currently serve as the Vice President for Speech Language Practice on the ASHA board. I'm also a wife, a mom. I have two little girls, and I serve as the Chief Academic Officer of the Atlanta Speech School and the director for our Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. And our organization is pretty interesting. We are four schools in one building, a clinic, and a nonprofit all in one. But primarily, our school serves children with dyslexia and DLD. Um, and my research interests, I started my career as a researcher. I won't go into all that. I know time is limited. I started my career as a researcher and took a tenure track job after I finished my PhD, and then decided that I wanted to go into a more practical and applied setting. And I've been at the speech school for the last 6 years. Glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Louise Nichols. I am a speech language pathologist. I am currently the acute care rehabilitation manager at Duke Raleigh Hospital. I've primarily worked in acute care, but I've also worked in inpatient rehab and LTAC, long-term acute care. I'm primarily practice dysphagia. I'm board certified in swallowing and swallowing disorders. And I've been practicing for 10 years. So also worked in academia too. So really love talking with students. So really excited to be here talking with you all tonight.
Hi, I'm Michelle Summers. I'm a speech language pathologist at The Ohio State University. I work at the James Care Voice and Swallow Disorders Clinic, so I specialize in voice and dysphagia. I also specialize in singing health. So we have a program at Ohio State that caters to students from the music side of graduate studies and doctoral studies, as well as our graduate speech program, and they come together and do coursework on both sides as well as from the laryngology department. So they get to observe surgery as well as clinical observation and come out with like the singing health specialization, which is a really neat kind of curriculum. And I'm also newly the clinical fellowship director in the last 2 years. So that's been exciting to start our rotating fellowship program. And so we're beginning our third year of interview process.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kennedy Wilkins. I'm currently a clinical fellow in speech language pathology. I work at Diamond Speech in Rehab, primarily doing private practice with pediatrics, though I do have some adult clients. And I also help cover at our small rural hospital once or twice a week as well. And then I help out with research right now at UNC with the TBI patients as well. So.
Thanks, everyone. Now let's get started. Our first topic is how to research CF opportunities. We have a few questions to get us started, but please start putting your questions on this topic into the Q&A feature below. Our first question will be for anyone on the panel. Where should someone start their CF or job search?
I'll go ahead and answer that. I think it's really important that starting off, I mean, it can seem very overwhelming. So I think finding the right time, first of all, when you want to start applying. And I don't know if I have the perfect answer for that, but I would start sooner rather than later. I always tell people I waited until the very last minute, and I was very stressed towards the end. And so I graduated in August. My program wrapped up in August. So I would definitely recommend, applying, maybe in the spring or even early like early in the year, so maybe like January or February, a lot of your rotating CFs, so places that have CFs that are only a year or 10 months, a lot of times they tend to line up with people who graduate in May. So those open up in like January and February. So that may be a good time for you to start applying if you're a May graduate. And again, if you're an August graduate like me, maybe the springtime would be a good time to start applying. So don't wait till the last minute. I also think it's important to think about what setting you want to work in. And you may not know that exactly, and that's okay. But just think about some place you may want to start, right? Something you might like to try. And then look at places that have that specialty or setting. So, for example, if you know that you want to work in a skilled nursing facility, then that's a great place to start looking at skilled nursing facilities. Or if you know you want to work in a school, then looking at schools in your area would be a great place to start. The other thing I was going to mention is location. And I want you to take this with a grain of salt because I think it is important to think about where you want to go. For example, if you want to stay in your area, it's great that you know that that's what you want to do. But I always tell people when you're looking for a CF, when you're looking for any job, if you're open to location, that's going to be a bonus. Because sometimes where you are, it may be heavily saturated with other students looking for CFs or looking for jobs. And so, if you're open to traveling outside of your hometown, I think that's the best thing you can do as a CF. I ended up going somewhere totally different than my hometown for my CF, and I got those really strong skills. And then when I was ready to move, I was able to take those skills pretty much to any city that I wanted to. And every city that I've been since then, I haven't really had trouble finding a job, but I did have to pick up and move for that CF position. So I think when you're starting to look, thinking about where you want to be is important, but I also caution you to be open to other opportunities that may not be in your ideal location.
Thank you. Kennedy, were you going to add something?
Yes, Mary Louise, you had a perfect explanation. Basically, gave everything I was going to say. The only other things I would add is it really depends again on what type of position that you're looking for, based off of where you're going to find it online. So if you're looking for like a specific CF placement in a hospital setting, it might be that you have to go to like Duke Health Online, and that's where you're going to find like more career opportunities. But if you're just looking for general places like a SNF or schools, oftentimes either Glassdoor, even LinkedIn will have all of those job postings. So know that you may be able to find one job on several different sites, but if it's a specific place like a clinical fellowship in voice and swallowing or a clinical fellowship in an acute care setting, you might have to actually go to the specific health organization online to find that.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Michelle. Um, do you recommend reaching out to places or looking at specific websites when looking for CFs?
Yeah, so especially like in again, mine's specialized, and so there's so many voice centers across the country that actually kind of list as rotating voice fellowships. And so those are pretty much known within the voice community, but they're also listed on websites like Paves, Instagram, and the SIG3. And so that's where I kind of list mine is on SIG3, which is that special interest group for voice. So I think Ashley is always a really good resource for finding information. And I agree, like Mary Louise just like kind of summed everything up, that you just kind of want to know where you're looking and when. I mean, and really when positions come open, because that can happen anytime when a clinician kind of moves on from a position and we end up posting, like right now in our head and neck department, we have two positions open. And even ideally, if we want to hire a seasoned clinician, that might not always work out, right? Like we might not find the right candidate, or they might not be open to the salary. And so the last couple of times we've ended up hiring a CF because that's just what worked out. And so I think even if they're not listing for a CF, look for those opportunities and still apply for that because you might end up kind of working up that chain in getting that position anyway.
Thank you. Um, our next question is, can for Jana, can you talk a bit about staffing companies versus direct hire?
Yes, definitely. And I'm going to be thinking a little bit more specifically about school-based placements as well. So, like working directly for a school district versus working for an NPA or a non-public agency or contracting company. Some of the things that you might see when you are, say, for example, you do have a specific location, like I want to work in this city. So I'm looking at these school districts and then I'm speaking with this agency. You might see a little bit of a difference in comparison when you're comparing their salaries, for example. Some school districts, you'll be able to look up their salary schedule online and actually be able to see where you'd be placed. I would say, honestly, in my experience in the past, that salary schedule was kind of like posted. That's what the district can offer. And I've even heard some interesting stories from some folks being able to have some negotiating room, even in the school districts. So, you may as well ask, and worst case scenario, they tell you no. I've heard that some people are able to get a little bit more like wiggle room and a little bit more negotiating room sometimes when speaking with a staffing agency. And then one thing I have really noticed is that there's a little bit more opportunity if you're in need of, say, flexible hours or you're wanting to work more of a part-time position as opposed to a full-time position. Those part-time opportunities are a little bit easier to come by if you're working for like a staffing agency versus directly for a school district. And then one thing I was going to say is sometimes the supervision piece, you really want to be asking a lot of those questions about what is supervision going to look like during your CF year, of course, because that's so important, right? Sometimes for staffing agencies, and again, you want to ask the right questions because not all staffing agencies are created equal. But sometimes they will have a supervisor or mentor that's assigned to you that actually has time dedicated in their schedule to be able to be available to you. Whereas, like at a school district, sometimes that person is wearing multiple hats. Like me, for example, in the past, I had my full caseload and I was trying to supervise two CFs on top of it. So it was a little tricky for me to balance it all. So sometimes you might find that that supervisor actually has that dedicated time available in their schedule. And then the last thing I was going to say is that it depends on, say, for example, you do plan to be moving around or jumping around, or you like change and you like things to, gain different opportunities. You may be more interested in a staffing agency because they can provide you at least the continuity of that agency or that company, but you still have, like, I want to try out this age group. I want to try out this location. Whereas with a school district, you're kind of tied to that school district. But for some people, depending on their preferences, maybe that's what they're looking for. They're looking for kind of that stability and that continuity of placement options and getting to, kind of grow their roots, say, at that same school site year after year. So it will really depend on your personal preferences and your priorities too.
Thank you. Our next question is for Michael. What are the red and green flags to look for when looking at CF job postings?
Great question. I think it's funny too because I live in New Mexico and our state question is red or green because we eat a lot of red or green chili here, and so I was kind of playing around with that in my head. Um, the green flags, I think the most important thing, maybe red or green, is the vibe check. When you start interacting with people, if you get a pushy sales representative or a headhunter who's, oh, we need to schedule another call and another call, and oh my gosh, everything is going to be unicorns and rainbows, that's to me a red flag of this person is just trying to get you to sign on. If the conversation gets a little bit more real and they can tell you details about what a caseload might look like, or what, like Jana mentioned, what the supervision might look like, who the supervisor might be, what the placement might be like, those things tell me that it's a real position that they're considering you for versus just, oh, we want to get this person in and then we'll find a place for them later. I hope that makes sense. Once you start interacting with that, you'll know what it means when you come across it. Other red or green flags to look for. I think it's important transparency. And so when you get real and concrete answers about what the work, the day-to-day might be looking like, and also the administrative, the HR side of it. The clinical stuff absolutely matters, but at the end of the day, it's a job and you're doing it probably because you want to be paid as well. And so that stuff matters as well. And so making sure that that just aligns with your expectations and what you've taken the time to reflect on what you need for yourself, for your family, for your financial situation. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. And our next question is for Dr. Lee James. Is there any negative impact of completing your CF in another state than where you might, I'm sorry, Is there any negative impact of completing your CF in another state that isn't the one that you plan to practice in?
Yeah, so I think there's been so much said already, that kind of relates to this question. I think when Mary Louise started talking about just being open, I don't think that there's a negative or a downside if it means that you're going to get the experience that you hope to get. And one thing I want to say on this too, it's not exactly the question, but I think making sure that you sit, like other colleagues have already said, you sit, you really consider, okay, what do I want to do? What am I interested in right now? And if you can challenge yourself to think about the long game, I think that's helpful. But of course, SLPs, we can do many things, and that's why many of us came into this field. So you don't necessarily have to lock in, but I think it's good to think about the long game. And I have probably, because of school experiences and and other experiences, I've probably moved like 4 or 5 times, so that I can get the experience that I feel like I need is going to set me up. And so the thing about me is I think a lot about the long game, but I'm incredibly indecisive about the long game. And so I will jump into something, and before you know it, I'm like, "Ooh, it's 3 years. I'm not feeling this. I don't know why. I don't know why I moved to New Jersey. I don't want to be here in New Jersey." But anyway, so I think really sitting and thinking about like what's the long game, but not being too locked in. I don't think there's any downside. I think reaching out and making sure that you know the right questions to ask. Go online too after this meeting and look at ASHA's Interstate Compact. That is going to have, far-reaching implications for a lot of us who want to practice across states. But I would encourage you to either call the Action Center or just hop online to the ASHA website to really look at questions that you should be considering and asking. So, like, what state am I going to? Going to that state's licensure board, even calling the Action Center and saying, "Hey, I'm a student and give me some advice on questions to ask," just because you don't know what you don't know. And so reaching out to as many people, don't not obnoxious, you don't need 10 people, but reaching out to some really trusted sources to say, "Okay, I'm considering moving to Mississippi or, Delaware, what for the CF, what are things that I need to consider?" But in the end, I think my answer is no, there's no downside. I think it's already been said. Many folks on this call move around, we've moved around, and I wouldn't change my path for anything. And so enjoy the flexibility that's going to come along with the degree, but it can also be incredibly daunting because you're thinking, "Gosh, I can do all these things, but what is it that I really want to do?"
Thank you so. Oh, I'm so
I just
sorry.
wanted to add one more thing. I think sometimes I'm seeing a lot of questions about licensure. I think sometimes as a student, the licensing process seems very overwhelming and daunting. It is not that overwhelming and daunting when once you start the process. I was very concerned about it as a student. I wanted to do it all before I graduated, and I just wanted to do whatever I could to speed up that process. And there's nothing that you can really do now as a student. Once you graduate, your program will give you all of the things that you need to apply for your license. It takes a couple of weeks, several weeks sometimes, but it's really not that hard of a process. And once you are licensed, it's pretty easy to get licensed in another state. So I've been licensed in 4 states, and it's been a pretty smooth process for me in those 4 states that I've been in. And not once has having to get licensed in another state made me even think twice about moving somewhere. It's not something that I think about. I just go where the opportunity is. And I deal with the license later. It's really not as overwhelming as it seems right now in the moment as a student.
Thank you guys so much. This was some of the things that I had concerns about now when I came into grad school, so this is very helpful information. Our next question is how many CFs do you recommend applying for, especially if you're interested in a more competitive location like pediatric medical? Kennedy, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, absolutely. And I guess to give a little bit of transparency, I originally had a CF that was only in acute care. And then over the summer, when the whole Medicaid bill changed, I lost my original CF and had to go through the hiring process a second time. So I'm very familiar with applying to different places. And I have a little bit of a different perspective on both of them since I went through it twice. But I think it really is going to be specific to what type of position you're looking for. And if you are only looking for one specific niche, like if you only want voice, I would recommend applying to quite a few different voice centers. If you're more broadened or saying, I don't really know if I want to work in a school or a SNF or a private practice, I would honestly recommend, if you have a specific area that you're interested in, trying to apply for as many in that area and really going into these interviews with an open mind of trying to gather as much knowledge as possible from the employers to learn about the position. For specifics, I think I applied to maybe 5 or 6 my first round and then 4 or 5 the second round. However, after going through the interview process a few times, I was able to really gauge kind of what things I really liked about employers and what things I felt wasn't a good fit for me. So if you're able to narrow down like what location you want, the setting that you want, answering some of those bigger questions first can kind of help dwindle down your list so that you're applying to places that really match what you're looking for.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. Katie, do you have any questions to share from our audience?
You guys have been doing such an amazing job in the tap and our Q&A feature, answering so many questions so holistically. I was seeing a few questions talking about holding a CF as well as a PRN position and maybe how you're looking for that or any advice people have. So would anyone feel comfortable speaking on that topic?
I don't know if you can have a CF and a PRN position at the same time. Correct me if I'm wrong. But someone who works in the medical field, I don't think we've ever hired someone who wants to work PRN and they're in their CF. I think you have to complete your CF before you can take a PRN position elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the same for us as well. We would want you to complete your full training before going PRN.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I know it's like students are figuring out, okay, licensure, PRN, CF. So I think really focusing on some of those next steps in the proper order. So I think we've really wrapped up a great introduction for looking. What are some maybe things students could consider? So I think now would be a great time to hop into our next section about our resumes.
Yes. So again, if you have any questions on this, please put it in the Q&A feature. Our first question will be for the panel. What should not be on your resume for a CF position?
I really feel that you could probably skip the headshots. I get a lot of them with headshots. And while they're nice, it's nice to see a face with all the paperwork and that can set you aside. It's just an unnecessary thing. If you are going to include it, I think it can be really small. So
To add to that, I agree about the headshot. I also would say get rid of anything from high school, undergrad, get rid of those things. And also, personally, I don't like to read what is it, an objective statement? Or is that what it's called? An objective statement? I don't really like to read those because they all just seem very, they don't give me a lot of information. They all say the same thing. Your goal is to get a CF. We know that, right? Or I want to get a CF in the medical setting. We know that, right? That's why you're applying to this job. It just takes up space on your resume. And I hate to see an objective statement when your resume is 2, 3 pages. Get rid of it, shorten your resume, take it away.
I was actually going to say that. Get rid of page 2 and 3 and 4. If you can get it down to one, awesome. Two max.
Similar, get rid of any redundancy. We're all familiar with our field, and if you're in most settings, it'll probably be a speech language pathologist or somebody who's very familiar who's reviewing the resume, so they know what a lot of these settings look like. So when you're describing the different positions, you can really focus on the one or two things that might be really unique about your experience there, rather than provided services to children. We know that, and we know what that looks like. So maybe you mentioned if you got some really cool training on a unique diagnostic tool, or you got some specialty hours with a unique intervention approach. That can kind of be a little bit different. Emphasize that. The other stuff, if a lot of it's redundant, and we're familiar. So
And I would just add to get feedback. I think getting feedback on your resume is really critical. And I have a bit of a different perspective on the objective statements. I feel like if you have something to say that is unique and is different, I would vouch to put it there, because I feel like I look at a lot of resumes, but for different positions too in my role, not just SLPs. And I think that that can be a space where you can highlight, something so it doesn't get buried in your resume. Because when you do look at so many, you do kind of gloss over some things, admittedly. So I think if you have something unique and really, that could really help you stand out as a candidate, that you could include it there.
Thank you. And you guys already talked a little bit about this, but just to elaborate a little more, this question's for Michelle. What are the most important components to highlight on a resume?
Yeah, so as I'm currently going through my resumes right now, I use an application rubric. It helps me weed through things a little bit. So I look for professional development if you're involved, for your actual fellowship, leadership experience, experience specific to if you're coming to my fellowship by area or otherwise or acute or whatnot. I'm seeing basically, have you had scope experience? Have you had voice therapy experience? Have you been in an ENT clinic? Things like that. So I want to see if those are highlighted. Research project participation, volunteer community service, any awards or honors. And then I really look at your references. So on my website, I say everything that I want. And then I'm looking for specific clinical experiences to be listed under. So exactly kind of what Michael said. I know we know that you've seen what type of population you've seen, but I want to know specifics that you did and kind of how those highlight your skill set. Um, and then making sure that your that your name and contact information is on the top, because I'm going through so many and sometimes people have left that out. And then really if it gets too busy, then it can come across as though that you're looking unorganized. So I just really would say keep it really streamlined, and I like the kind of 2-page limit as well. So
Thank you. Our next question is for Michael. How should you address any lack of experience on a resume?
I think it'll depend on the setting that you're applying to and if that lack of experience is going to be really relevant. If you haven't seen a certain population, but it's not a population you'll be working with, I think it's better not to draw attention to it. In data, when we have an outlier, what do we do with it? We set it aside because it's an outlier. And if you keep drawing attention to it, that's not gonna help you out. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And conversely, how do you include a wealth of experience while trying to keep your resume short and succinct? Let's pass this question to Dr. Lee James.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to ask me. That's such a good question. I think that it's been said, the more concise you can be in your resume, I think the better. And so sometimes one of the challenges is when you have a lot of experience, you have to kind of decide what is the most relevant experience to the position that you're going for. And so you might have done a lot of things. Maybe you were, you volunteered here, you were a nanny, you've done all these things, wonderful things with kids, and you're applying for, let's say, an early intervention role. I think, making sure that you really narrow and hone in those things that are most relevant for that particular position. And I'm really guilty of this myself. I think a lot of the things that I do are really cool, and I just want somebody to see it. Like, I'm like, please, I just want to put it on my documentation so that that, I'm a certified diver. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't really need to go on this particular document. So I feel like, again, those mentors in your life can be really supportive, and take that job description, take that position and match it up against those experiences you're going to highlight on your resume. And if there's not, a ton of alignment, then I would say just leave it. Because and I know this is a later question, but there may be opportunity for you to highlight it in a cover letter, like something like, while you won't see this experience in my resume, I am, certified, or I have done X, Y, and Z. And so I think there still may be some opportunity for you to share, because so often those experiences, even though they they may seem tangential, they really have helped you become the person you are, and it's likely that those experiences taught you a lot. So it's just about, how do you figure out how to weave it in so that you don't seem, I think it was Jana or Michelle who said it, disorganized, like you're missing the point of the position. So keeping your resume streamlined, getting some feedback, and then asking yourself, okay, if there's a cover letter opportunity, how do I weave those experiences in? And if you get the interview, then that's an opportunity too for you to shine and share about, things that you weren't able to get in that resume.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee James.
Can I, Haley, can I add just one more thing?
Yes, of course.
So I just wanted to say this because being a medical SLP, I get a lot of feedback from students who say, I haven't had a medical placement, or, I didn't get that opportunity, and what do I put on my resume? And so I just want to say, when you don't have the medical experience, or you haven't had a medical placement, I would really highlight, as a hiring manager, I like to see students who may not have had the clinical experience, but maybe they have taken some CEUs. I like to see students who have been to CEU events, students who have been to conferences, if it's your state conference, if it's an ASHA conference, if it's, in BASLA, National Black Association for Speech, Language, and Hearing conference, and puts if you saw like a great medical CEU, put that on your resume. Passing your valve. They have tons of free CEUs on your website. I love to see a student who's like, no, I don't have medical experience, but I've done these passing mirror valves, or I've done are these passing mirror CEUs, or I've done MBS IMP, or I took LSVT for students, whatever. That's something that I do like to see. Also, being able to highlight any transferable skills. So no, you weren't, no, you don't have any acute care experience, but, through grad school, you interned for such and such company, and you were a leader in this way, and this is transferable because of X, Y, and Z. You're used to working on your feet, you're flexible, all of these things. And again, like Dr. Lee James said, that's something that you may want to highlight in your cover letter. But just because you don't have that medical experience, you can still highlight the experience you do have, or at least show that you're open and willing to learn on your resume.
Thank you guys
If
so much. These were so,
I would
oh,
add on that if I can, because I know this question, I see it coming up in the chat a lot about, I don't have that medical experience, but I want to get in that setting. It tends to be more competitive in different ways. Also think about that setting doesn't equal population. Maybe you didn't step foot in a hospital during your clinical rotations, but those populations, especially the pediatric ones, go to school. I did get to do a lot of medical experiences in a children's hospital. I had several children with TBIs in different ways and states. And I used to be a teacher. I've worked in schools all my life. And I was actually in this really cool position to be able to help create this transition program for these students with TBIs for when they go back to school and their acute care is over. Because maybe the hospital SLP is seeing them for 3 weeks. And then they need a transition plan to get back into their daily living. And so those kids go to school too. There's medical fragile classrooms in many of our districts. I have several in my district. And so a lot of those same things, or those same people and populations, you can be working with them in other settings. We have SLPs who are working on feeding plans. We have SLPs who go to meetings with our school nurses and receive medical documentation from physicians, very specialized or general, and work on that in different settings. So just because you didn't go in a hospital or in a SNF doesn't mean you don't have skills and clinical experiences that are 100% relevant to those populations. I hope that makes sense and that I didn't go too fast.
Thank you guys so much. This was such amazing information. Katie, do we have any questions from the audience?
This panel is doing amazing. Even before questions are popping up, you guys are answering them, fielding them so amazing. So I just want to say big kudos to you guys. I think we've answered a number of the questions in the chat, or also topically how we're going to be answering them. I think maybe this is an interesting question to end on. I think it's a question on the top of a lot of students' mind. How do you maybe think AI has changed the CFY application process, especially in terms of resumes? And these students are wondering, are there any keywords we should be looking out for, or maybe any thoughts you have on this? So I'll field this to Jana if you'd like to start.
Oh gosh, I was hoping you didn't send it directly to me. I will be very honest. I use AI very, very not regularly. And so I just will say if you're going to use it at all, use it with a grain of salt. Remember that you are the expert, you're the clinician. So always, if you're going to use it, please review it afterwards. Make sure the information is actually true and representative to who you are, what your background actually represents. As many of us know, sometimes AI platforms and systems will generate information that's not accurate. So you really don't want to be sending a resume into a company that has inaccurate information. One example is I just saw on a resume, it said something like a member of American Speech, Language, Hearing, and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board or something. It was a lot of extra words that I was certain, is not part of our state licensing board. It's not, a description for ASHA. So that's just an example that recruiters may actually see when they're taking a look at your resume. So if you are going to use it very thoughtfully, cautiously, always self-edit afterwards. But I hope that some on the panel have extra suggestions because I'm eager to hear more input about the AI piece.
Or even oh, perfect. Michael, do you want to go ahead?
It's such a big topic right now. I was just at our state conference a couple months ago with some employees, and that was the focus of it, more in a clinical sense. But I think it's perfectly okay to use it as an editing tool, depending on your personal convictions about it, because people have very strong feelings both ways. Great as an editing tool. I think it can do that really well. Totally agree with Jana. Double check the information because it makes mistakes. I think, and this hasn't really come up in our flow of questions yet, but soft skills are one of the most important things that I look for when I'm hiring for my school team, when I'm hiring for my company, when I'm at the university interviewing applicants. Soft skills, being open, trainable, curious. Are you somebody who I want to spend all day working with? I share an office with my colleagues a lot of the times. I want to make sure that you're somebody who I can stand to be around. And so just thinking about that and how you present yourself, AI can't help with that. That it comes across in your professionality, your collegiality, how willing you are to interact with people, setting boundaries as well. Like it doesn't just mean being a pushover. It also means being able to say no when you mean no, or ask questions, or say, yes, I already understand this. Great. I love that. Now you just saved me time. I can get on to something else. I love it when I have people say things like that. So soft skills, AI cannot cover those.
I also think it's important to, yes, think about the buzzwords that you're using on your resume. So think about the setting that you're applying to and what are some skills that they're looking for and making sure that you're using those words. And I think this is even before AI, but even like the recruiters who are reading your resume, they're not speech pathologists, they're not audiologists. So they don't really know what those words mean. So make sure that you're using the professional language. Because as a hiring manager, for example, I might say to our recruiter, I'll say, hey, I'm looking for someone who has fees experience and MBSS experience. And so what happens is the recruiter goes through the resumes and they look for fees, MBSS, fees, MBSS. And if they don't see those, then they're not going to pull your resume, unfortunately. So like think about, if you have skills, clinical clinical skills or clinical expertise, or you've done tests or used some sort of objective assessment, make sure that you're putting that in your resume so that the recruiter or the AI or the computer program, whoever, can pick it up and can scan for those keywords. Also, I was going to say, I was in an interview recently that was via Zoom, and the candidate actually used AI during their interview, like Chat GPT. When they didn't know an answer, they plugged it into their interview and it went terribly. So please don't do that. I'd rather you say, I'm not really sure what that is. I don't have experience, but I'd love to learn, instead of saying, can you repeat the question while you're actively typing in Chat GPT and then read off some fluff that makes zero sense. Like that is a way to end the interview abruptly. So please don't do that. Don't use AI in that way.
That is such a good point because I was going to say most of the people you are interviewing with know that you are a clinical fellow. They know you are a recent graduate. We don't expect you to know everything. So I agree. I feel like you going straight to an AI platform to get your answer is it's not an authentic way to respond. So I really appreciate honestly when someone says, I haven't gotten that experience. I'm a really quick learner, or just showing that you're quick and good at problem solving is really helpful. But we definitely don't expect you to know everything.
I really like to see wording like interpretation of, I'm learning interpretation of fees. I'm learning interpretation of MBS because we know you're not doing those and especially not doing them by yourself yet. So I think that's a really smart way to word it on resumes. And then also, don't forget to kind of give a shout out to your mentors and your supervisors because when I see, especially this is skipping ahead a little bit to letters, but when I see people saying, I'm doing these plan of cares, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm like, well, but are you? Like, I think you're doing it with somebody. So just remember to kind of stay humble within the whole process. And that goes a long way too with the people you're interviewing with, because we're all learning. So.
Thank you all so much. We will be moving on to our next topic, which is how to write a strong cover letter. So our first question will be for the whole panel, do you need a cover letter when applying to CFs?
I'd say
Seeing
only if
yes.
they ask for it, especially a larger company with some sort of electronic system. It might have it forces you to upload it or like an automatic gatekeeper,
Hmm.
like, oh, you didn't follow the requirements. For my company, I'm a very small company. I read them all personally and I don't require it. I think it's a great opportunity to get some of those soft skills out there, to get some of your personality in there. But it doesn't have to be a separate document that you attach. It can just be the body of your email, truly what it was originally, intended as a cover letter. So, yeah.
And I just
What
can
I
piggyback on what Michael is saying. I feel like you should make sure you follow what's asked. So if a cover letter is asked, make sure you provide a cover letter. If a cover letter is not asked for and you can, even if you can get it in there, I really believe like the employer, they're looking for certain things, make sure you kind of follow the directions, so to speak. And as Michael said, if you can get it into your email or in some other communication, I think that's great. But I like cover letters because again, I think it gives folks an opportunity to kind of share a little bit of who they are. And so it's nice. I'd rather read a cover letter than a resume, honestly. But and the resume is important, but I enjoy reading the cover letter because it gives me a sense of like who that person is, especially in a field like speech language pathology where we all have the degree and yes, we've passed the praxis and we're all smart and we're all detail oriented. Like, a lot of us are type A. Like we have so many similarities. Like we're really strong as a field academically, I feel like. And so, yeah, anyway, do I think follow the directions.
I think it's also really important that if you're applying to different locations, that you personalize that letter to that location, because again, that's one of those like little attention to details. And if it's a generic letter going out to everyone, like we know that. that's what you did. So it doesn't take a lot more time to just be like, oh, to the Ohio State University versus to Vanderbilt or whatever, so that we know you actually like took that extra 5 minutes. That means a lot to us as we're receiving those. Yeah, for me, it's we require them, but it's also like a make or break for your resume for me as well. Like it tells me a lot about who you are as a person and whether I want to call you. So,
Thank you guys. Our next question is, what should I consider highlighting in my cover letter outside of what is on my resume? Um, let's field this to Kennedy.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering if that was going to get thrown to me. To quickly piggyback off of what was previously said, I actually had an employer that didn't require a cover letter, and I provided one anyways. And during the interview process, they brought up how much they knew that I was invested in the position and how interested I was because I provided a cover letter. So I would recommend if it's a position that you're really interested in, if you're able to kind of pick out some key details or why you think that you would stand out to the employer, I would recommend sending in a cover letter because at the end of the day, it could even help frame the interview because it's giving them more information about who you are and they're able to learn more about what would make you a good candidate for the position. But back to your question, Haley, good things to include on a cover letter that I included to help stand out. A lot of these can also be on the resume, but maybe expanding on specific things. Like if you had a leadership role, what's something unique that you did in the role? What did you learn from it? And how do you think that will make you a good provider? Or I saw someone in the comments and Q&A section talk about how they have a position or like a clinical experience that they're about to start, but they haven't started it yet. And it's like in the weird position of being in that interview process, but that clinical placement is going to be really, paramount to the actual fellowship that they're applying to. So I would recommend talking about that, talking about how excited you are to be starting this, new clinical rotation doing X, Y, and Z, and what kind of skills you anticipate getting to learn under your supervisor. And really just kind of expanding and highlighting some of the little details about maybe volunteer experience or a committee that you've served on and what makes you passionate about the position that you're applying for.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. And now this can be for the whole council or for the whole panel. Um, can each of you say one of your favorite or top things that you would like to see in a cover letter?
So I'll say I personally don't love a cover letter. I think I'm the oddball out, but I can count on one hand the number of strong cover letters that I've read. A lot of them are actually not great, and they don't have a lot of information. It's usually just a regurgitation of your resume. And so I haven't read a lot that are really strong. When I do see a strong cover letter, though, I like to get hooked. Like I like a hook in the first sentence. It's not like, "Hi, my name is such and such, and I'm applying because I'm really interested in this position." If that is your first line, I'm probably gonna zone out. Like I want to read something that's captivating, something about yourself that really draws me in, something unique, a unique experience. So when I think about strong cover letters that I've read from students and CFs in particular, maybe they've had, maybe it's a personal story, not too personal, but maybe it's some personal story that they're able to tie into their professional life. Maybe it is some other career that they've had. So I've had some students that have, or some CFs who've had some really interesting prior careers. Like I think I had one who like worked in foreign affairs and was like fluent in French, and she told me all about like this other job that she had and how she tied it in with speech. And it was very interesting. And I was hooked the minute I read it. One of the best cover letters that I've read. And so something that you absolutely must have if you want a strong cover letter, and if you want it to get read by me, have a hook, something that's going to draw me in and captivate me, not just, "Hi, my name is such and such, and I really want to work here. I'm really interested in this position." That's not enough to sell me.
I was
Thank
just going to
you.
add to that. I feel like if you show that you've actually researched the company or the position, like that actually helps stand out too. And it's not just I'm just sending this cover letter to these 10 organizations, you know. So I feel like if there's actually that thought and an intentionality, that helps you stand out a little more too.
I would add personality. That I think of the resume is this important but kind of cold document to make sure you check the boxes. The cover letter, when done well, is like, oh, wow, this is interesting. You're the person I want to meet in the break room for coffee so I can learn more about your path. Like it's supposed to be this warm kind of thing. And the resume, it's supposed to be this cold list of bulleted items. Kind of keep that in the back of your head. Like, would this be something that somebody would be professionally, right? Like, don't get too personal, but it's okay to be a little personal. It's a fine line. Think back to your personal statements when you applied to grad school. Personal statements, essay, whatever it might have been called.
Yeah, and again, I think including the information that you're not going to be able to say in your resume, experiences that you've had, things, experiences that have really changed your perspective. I think that's why I enjoy cover letters because I think if they're informative, it helps me understand a little bit about who you are, like what's most meaningful to you, what do you value as a young professional, how are you hoping to grow, what experiences do you want to get? If there's a particular person in that setting that you really want to work with, name them. Like I met so and so at ASHA and they're incredible and I really want to learn from them. I had a research experience with this person. Like you can really kind of set yourself apart because I think it was asked over in the questions that I'm reading, there it's going to be a competitive process and there are going to be, people who are incredibly bright and have had incredible experiences as you have. So you really have to be thinking through that lens. Like, don't just say things to differentiate yourself, but try your best to differentiate yourself in a way that's going to be meaningful, in a way that maybe even through that cover letter, I think Mary Louise said that you can try and connect as best as you can on paper, like with the audience who's going to be reading it.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, try to not make it look like you're bragging on yourself. It's like this is such a fine line to do all this together, right? You want to show all your amazing things, but you don't want it to look like you're just completely bragging on yourself because I think it is really important to look and stay humble. Because as soon as I read that, I'm like, okay, all right, we got you. So I think it's important to do that, but also like I am more interested in like what you want to do in the field to like make it better, and what your goals are coming out of this. What does 5 years look like for this for you? What maybe brought you to the field and why you're passionate about being in it. So those are things that are, I think, interesting to me too. Getting to know you in that letter.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Now we'll discuss how to stand out during your interviews. Again, if anyone has any questions about interviews in particular, you can start popping them into the Q&A feature now. Our first question is, how do we make a great first impression when interviewing? Dr. Lee James, would you like to answer this one?
Be on time. Be on time. Just if you're showing up to Zoom or if you're showing up in person, that is, I think, how you show up and making sure that you're on time is really critical. And so if you live in a city like Atlanta or New York or, LA, wherever you are, and the traffic's going to be crazy, you just never know what's going to happen. So I think making sure that you're on time. And it's already kind of been said, but having kind of a checklist or questions that you like know are going to be asked of you, make sure you know about the facility. Make sure you know as much as you can. Like if the staff members are listed on the website, look at some of those staff members. Like do the best you can to really study and not so that you can recite the mission of the organization. Like, and I'm aligned with your mission and vision. Like, that's fine, but make sure that it's not superficial and be as authentic as you can possibly be. I think that I I don't think so much in my current role about like what people have on, or I know that, and I know other people may feel differently. And so I think making sure that I think Michael said it, like you catch the vibe, like just know the vibe of the place you're going to. If everybody's going to be in business casual, if it's really meaningful to you that you get that position, you might want to show up in business casual. I mean, just do the best that you can to, again, not to be inauthentic, but to make sure that to demonstrate that you understand the environment that you're in and what you're getting into. And I like having, I think it's important too in the way you show up to an interview is like that you do have some real wonderings and questions about the job. Not like, at the end, like, and what's the salary or what's not like that, but like, if I take this CF on, how much time am I going to get to spend with this person? Or what will my experience be day to day? Like, really to try to demonstrate not only that you're a critical thinker, but that you're really considering them. It's important too. And I hear Michelle, in when she said a few times to be humble. I do, though, want to emphasize that you should be confident. And you are interviewing these people too. It is nice to believe that, you know, it's only us interviewing you. Most of the time, we want you more than you want to be there because we need somebody there. So don't, shortchange yourself. Talk about yourself. Talk about the things that you've done. Talk about what makes you stand out. I think if the worst thing people can say when you leave is like, wow, that person talked a lot about herself. It's like, yeah, because I'm really trying to get this job. And I even say things like that when I'm meeting people for the first time, like, and by the way, this is the kind of person that I am. Like, I know I only have a short amount of time with you. And so it might seem like I'm talking a lot about myself. I just want to make sure that you have everything you need to know about me before I leave this room. And so I promise you, if you give me the job, I will do a lot of active listening, but I only have 30 minutes with you. And this job is really important to me. So I think even saying things like that so that you appear really pragmatic is important. But I believe in an interview, do the best that you can to shine because there's going to be that day. Michelle, Jana, myself, we're interviewing like six other people. And so at the end of the day, I want to still be thinking about Michael. Like, gosh, man, I got to call Michael. I'm going to call him tomorrow? So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you so much. That was super helpful on how to put your best foot forward when going into interviewing. Our next question will be for Jana. What are some popular interview questions that students should be prepared to be asked?
Ooh, to be asked. Good question. I would definitely say it depends on the place you're interviewing for. I'll think of some examples, especially school-based, since that's where a lot of my experience has been. Most places are going to ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself. A real general way of just starting the conversation. Sometimes folks want to hear about your most recent clinical experience. Obviously, that's going to be a big point of discussion. And then I was going to say also, sometimes I like to ask, how did you get into the field of speech language pathology? It's kind of nice to hear a personal story and actually show off kind of your passion about the field. And then there's often some more like scenario type of questions, like how would you assess a student who's in fourth grade with some language concerns? Might be like one of the examples. Or what would a typical therapy activity look like if you were running a group of third graders who are working on articulation or something like that? So sometimes they kind of want to see how you think on your feet. You don't have to have an answer right away. I always am actually impressed when folks come with notes that they even want to refer to. Or they say, give me a second, let me think about that. Totally okay. And then I was going to say sometimes they ask questions too, like, what are you hoping your CF will look like? I know that's one of the questions we actually like to ask, or what are you hoping CF supervision looks like as well. As I mentioned in the very beginning, we are not expecting you to know everything. So I actually, one thing I will say is we do hope that you are actually coming with your own questions. Because Ryan, I agree with you. There are so many jobs out there and not enough SLPs. So you are a hot commodity. So make sure you're coming actually with your own questions because you're there interviewing each prospective employer as well to figure out if it's the right fit for you. So, yes, we're going to ask lots of questions, but make sure you come with your own as well.
On the topic of asking questions, this question is for Kennedy. What are some good questions to ask in an interview?
That's a great question. And the first one, Jana has mentioned a few times. Please ask what kind of support this facility can offer a CF, what supervision will actually look like. Is that going to be, weekly meetings? Is there going to be specific time set aside for collaboration? Another one that I always like to ask is what does interdisciplinary care look like? How often will I be collaborating with, an OT or a PT? What can I kind of expect a day to day to look like? And if it's a private practice or acute care, what is that transition going to look like from taking on, a full caseload? Am I going to walk in day one and have 13 kids on my caseload? And if so, what's the transition period going to go for having that support and supervision if needed? Of course, there are specific questions for every type of setting. Like if you're in a SNF, a lot of people like to ask questions on productivity standards and what that might look like for having groups sessions instead of one-on-ones. But the more specific questions kind of will just depend on what your actual interest is for where you're wanting to get a position. But the one question that I like to ask employers that I felt gave me a good way to kind of gauge what the facility was like Dr. Lee James was saying, not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them, is I always like to ask, what do you love about your facility and your rehab team? Because I felt like it gave me a good opportunity to kind of learn more about the personality of the actual team. So,
Thank you so much. And it seems that asking questions is something that everyone mentioned as being something very important when going into interviews. Does anyone else on the panel have suggestions for questions to ask?
I would add that just make sure whatever you're asking is done authentically because the company, the school, the hospital, the agency, they're investing a lot if they choose to hire you and you're investing a lot in them. And really it's about making sure it's a good fit, that this is a good mutual investment. And so it's less about thinking of the super clever question that'll make you stand out and more about thinking about the authentic question that will show you're a good fit. You know that this is a good fit because I might want to hire you, but if I say, ooh, I don't think they really want to be here long term, maybe I'm going to go with somebody else who does want to be here long term because I know this is a better investment for my time and my energy and my finances, right? And that's true of any setting. So it's, yeah.
Thank you all. Katie, do you have any questions from the audience?
I think we're kind of getting some questions from people like, okay, we put our best foot forward in the interview. We've maybe controlled what we can, but maybe from those who are hiring or are hiring CFs, what's maybe the biggest indication that you find after that interview that you notice someone's a good fit for this position? So, Mary Louise, would you like to maybe start with this? So, what are some kind of takeaways after that interview that make you say, oh, this student's probably a good fit for our position?
I'm on mute. Sorry. I think someone who follows all the tips that we've kind of talked about already, someone who arrived to the interview on time, they had a strong resume, they had a strong cover letter, they asked great questions during the interview, someone who was positive throughout the interview. Those are some things that I definitely look for. And oftentimes interviewers will try to maybe trip you up to see if you're going to make a negative comment about something or if you're going to make a pessimistic comment about something. Oh, I didn't get any medical experience in my grad program because I wasn't chosen and my grad program didn't have that opportunity. So now I'm kind of thinking, like, that probably wasn't the most professional statement. So maybe I'm not going to go with that person. They seem a little pessimistic, versus someone saying, I'm open to learning. These are the things that I didn't have this opportunity, but these are the things that I've done to kind of get that experience outside of my program. So looking for someone who's positive, looking for someone who's willing to learn. I think the worst thing you can do is come in, and Michelle mentioned this, being overconfident or acting like you're not willing to learn or that you know everything. We know when we hire a CF, we know we are committing to teaching someone. We are committing to training someone. Please don't come in and act like you know everything. Please don't come in and think you're going to hit the ground running because you're not. In fact, that's the opposite of what you're going to do. There's a lot of teaching, a lot of training, right? We want someone who wants to be autonomous. We want someone who wants to learn and is a quick learner, but by no means do we think that you are going to come in and just start getting to work. Okay. We know that there will be training to do on our part. So, someone who is open to learning, willing to learn, someone who's flexible and just has a really positive attitude. Again, the interview is where you want to be personable. That's your time to sell yourself, and get across to us what you could not get across to us on paper on your resume. And we're really looking for someone who just has a positive attitude, and that's really going to work well with our teams. And so, yeah, I think just being personable, being positive, and just showing that you're open and willing to learn are the best things or the things that I look for when I'm thinking about a candidate that I want to hire.
Thank you, everyone. For our final set topic, we'll discuss how to negotiate compensation. After this, we'll have some time to answer any remaining questions from the audience. If you have any questions on compensation, start popping them in our Q&A feature now. So for Dr. Lee James, do you have any tips on how students should assess compensation and benefits for a CF?
You know, I don't. I really don't. Let's see if somebody else can give a better answer.
I'm happy to answer that. So this is something that I am very passionate about. So my first thing that I'm going to say is make sure you know what the rates are, what the salary is in your area, in your setting. And Ash actually publishes that information. So if you just want to get a rough estimate, a good start, go to Ash's website, find out, okay, if I have this many, they break it down by years of experience, setting, part of the country that you're in, all of these things. So you can really get an idea of what someone like you might be making. Okay. That's the first part. Then, I would also look at, I would always negotiate. I can't tell people enough. Do not ever walk away and accept an offer and not negotiate. It is so, so important. And the reason that that's very important is because if you stay somewhere, you're wherever you are, a lot of places offer raises annually. And what you start off as is what determines your salary for the rest of the time that you're with that company. So, for example, if I take a $70,000 CF and I get a 3% raise every year, right? 3% on $70,000 is different than if I were to negotiate for 75,000. Now I'm getting 3% on 75,000, right? So think about those things because it's going to determine the trajectory for the rest of your time at that company for sure, but potentially for the rest of your career. So always negotiate, never walk away from money because when you don't negotiate, you're walking away from money. That's first and foremost. Now, a lot of companies, especially hospitals like the one where I work at, they're moving away from negotiations, and it's because they have this set scale that they offer and it's a calculation that HR does on their end, and it's based on your years of experience and sometimes other things like if you have a doctorate degree or a PhD, they'll factor that in. But pretty much everyone's on a similar scale. And I've worked at several hospitals where they just say, we don't negotiate. And that's fine, but you at least want to ask. I'm seeing that more and more often where companies they use a set scale and they're not negotiating, and that's okay. But you always want to try to negotiate. The third thing I'm going to say is don't get into the comparison game with your peers with a salary that they're making because everyone's compensation package is different. So when I was starting my CF, I had some of my peers who were working at SNFs and making $90,000. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money. And I'm not making that, right? But, or, they may be at a private practice making, $80,000, whatever. And that's a lot for a CF, depending on where you're located. However, um, it may be $90,000, but they're only getting paid for the time that they're spending with the patient. Or maybe it's $90,000, but they're only working 25 hours a week and so their salary is prorated. That 90,000 is prorated to reflect the 25 hours of a week of direct patient care that they're doing, whatever. All kinds of things go on, all kinds of stipulations, and you want to make sure that just don't listen to the number, but look at what the package is. Is it $90,000 but 95% productivity? You are going to be so burnt out that $90,000 isn't going to mean a thing to you because you're going to hate your job and you're going to be really burnt out and you're going to want to quit. Okay. So I'd much rather take a CF for 65,000 and have a reasonable productivity, have a place that has a positive work culture where I'm getting benefits, I'm getting PTO, I'm getting great mentorship. Those are the things that you want to focus on. That's the benefits package. It's not helpful really if you're making $100,000, $90,000, $80,000, and you're having to pay out of pocket for your benefits because benefits are very, very expensive. I don't know if you ever paid for health insurance out of pocket, but you're talking about a couple $1,000s a month. It's very expensive. So think about these things. The things that you want to see when you're negotiating, it's not just pay, but are you getting paid holidays? Are you getting medical, dental, vision insurance? Do you have some sort of life insurance or short-term disability? What does the work culture look like? Are you getting paid for your documentation time? Or are you just getting paid for time when you're with your patients? Are you getting paid if the patient doesn't show up? Do you have to build your own caseload? Because if you come in, you start and you've got two patients on your caseload, and sure, you get paid $500 for every eval you do, but you do one eval a week, that doesn't help you, does it? And it could be months before you build a caseload, big enough to make a reasonable salary. So these are all things that you want to think about. Don't listen to what other people are making, but you really want to focus and hone in on what your benefits package is. And it's more than just money because I can promise you the money will get old so fast when you are burnt out and you hate your job.
I'm just like applauding over here. I'm like, yes, all of that. The total compensation benefits package is so much more important to look at than just that little number. That little number doesn't mean a whole lot in comparison to actually how many days are you going to work? How many hours are you going to work? Such a good point. I remember interviewing for a different position and I had only ever worked in the school. So I only ever got paid my full 8-hour day. And then they told me, well, you're only going to get paid for your certain students or your kids that you show up at their house and you service them. And I said, well, what about the drive time between? And they said, nope. And that was a huge change for me. And I was going to be making a huge, honestly, not lateral, but a real big dip down in salary when I was actually comparing the numbers. So such good points.
Other things you can negotiate would be like dues for your licensure, dues for ASHA. You can ask for CEU money. So, like, I get a whole paid conference each year, whether I'm presenting or not. And then a second conference if I am presenting. So, we have like a super generous uh, department in that instance, but not all departments are like that, right? So you want to see what you can get and kind of try to negotiate those little extras can add up as well.
I would also encourage you to negotiate your schedule if you can, especially in hospital settings that are 365 days a year. We need people to cover Saturday and Sunday. So when I get someone who's like, I'll work Saturday and Sunday, there's a differential for that. Oftentimes we have patients who need to be seen later in the evenings. So if you're like, I'll work 10 to 7, there's a differential for that. We pay for that. I worked when I worked started off working in the hospitals. I worked a Thursday through Sunday schedule for a long time. Loved it. Don't knock it till you try it. But I made extra money for working that schedule. I got a 3-day weekend and I got extra hours. So basically every pay period I got paid for 8 free hours. So instead of working for 10-hour days, I got paid for 40 hours a week, but instead of working for 10-hour days, I worked for 9-hour days. So every week, my company essentially gave me 4 hours free. And that was an incentive for me. That was one of the incentives for me working the weekends. There's a lot more flexibility on working the weekend. So, if you're interested in, if you're interested in negotiating those things, use your schedule as leverage because companies pay you when you work those later hours, 10 to 7 or 9 to 6 or whatever, or, Saturday and Sunday. Companies are paying for those things. So it's not just money, it's not just benefits, but use your schedule as leverage too. Negotiate that also.
Thank you all so much. These are a bunch of amazing things to keep in mind when going in for negotiating. Um, the next question for Michael, do you have any other tips or guidance for students when negotiating?
There's a great resource. The Informed SLP is this newsletter for clinicians in all areas of our field. It's wonderful. They've just started a project called Informed Jobs, and it's about salary transparency. And I think it's a super cool thing. Like Mary Louise said, I'm really passionate about it. So yeah, that transparency, look up Informed Jobs. It's got real clinicians are adding the data. So hopefully it's accurate. ASHA has data on it. Know the field, know the market that you're going into. Know that unfortunately it depends more on setting than your licensure. Like it's not enough to say like, oh, SLP should all make this. Nope. Unfortunately, my experience with applying for a CF, there was this really prestigious position in a hospital institute that I was offered, and I was super excited about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. And then I saw the salary, and then I saw my school salary, and I was like, this is double what this is. And then when you add in the fact that this is year round and I get my summers with my son here, like, and I mentioned this and I said, here's my offer letter. What can you do, please? And sometimes the settings, they're just not comparable and they can't. They can say, yeah, that's the school thing. Go that way if you want that. So keep that in mind. You can always, always, always ask. It doesn't always mean asking for more dollars. Like it doesn't always mean asking for more dollars per hour. Start there if you can. But all of those perks, those benefits, the schedules, absolutely negotiate those things. Ask your colleagues, ask your mentors, your supervisors in a polite and respectful way what they're earning, what they started at, what they know about the market. We're colleagues. We're happy to share that information as long as it's done respectfully, and politely. I always just say, like, would you mind if I ask, where did you start at? And if you're not comfortable saying, perfectly okay. That's a really easy way to do it. Ask around in that sense. There's something else on that note I was going to say. Do the math, write down the numbers, and break it down. Some people are going to offer you a salary. Some people are going to offer you an hourly plus a differential plus this. So what I did, I love Excel. I'm a nerd, and I said, okay, this is the salary. I'm expected to work this many days and this many hours. That comes out to this much an hour. I get a 32% match on my retirement because schools are sweet. Okay, I multiply that times my salary, break it down, that comes out to this much an hour. So really I'm making this much an hour, but I don't get it in my pocket right now. Now, if I go to the staffing agency, that's one of the benefits of the staffing agency. You don't get that pension, but you might get that cash in your pocket now. And that's a personal calculation of what works for you. If you're not going to stay around long enough for the pension, don't go for it. If you know you're going to, pension is almost always a better deal. it just depends on you and your circumstances, but do the math so you're not confused. So you're comparing apples to apples. So they say, oh my gosh, we cover your licensure, which is nice. It's a cool perk. That's $300, right? Like that's a small amount compared to we pay for a conference every year. That's several $1,000s versus $10 an hour more, right? Like you have to compare apples to apples. So do the numbers, write them down, get out your calculator, and think about what is important for you. The number doesn't, I mean, money matters. We all have bills to pay, truly. Yes, I don't mean to minimize that. But if you're not going to enjoy your life, the money doesn't matter. Yeah.
And can I just add one thing? I know we're running out of time. I think one thing that is really that's like kind of a takeaway for me this session, I just want to say is have a mentor that you can just ask everything to, because you don't want to be in a position where you've got people, we all have mentors, and then we have mentors like that you can really just, I have your cell phone number. I don't have to kind of do the dance around, like, thank you so much for taking the time. It's like, hey, I'm applying for my CF. I'm really anxious about this. I don't want to make a mistake. Like, and just have a mentor that you can just really shoot straight with, so that you can do some of what Michael is saying without needing to worry too much, and that you can just get real talk, because you're going to need that person. There is just so much you don't know. And I still have those people in my life, and I've had my C's for quite a while now, and I am still at every turn, career turn, reaching out to folks and saying like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Mentors that I can trust, who will just tell me what it is, even if I don't want to hear it. And that's something too. You got to be prepared to hear, things that you don't want to hear. But if you trust that person, they really just have your best interests at heart.
Thank you all so much for all this
I
amazing
think,
info.
Michael, did you have one? This will be
Oh,
our
I'm so
last thing we're
sorry.
going to share. We're good.
If I
Michael, do you have one
can,
last thing to add?
just because Dr. Lee James's comment was so wonderful, the mentor thing, absolutely. I have a supervisor. She's one of my supervisors in graduate school, and I was applying for a job that she had, and that what you don't want to hear is really important, because she was like, Michael, this is not a good move for you. Like, don't do it for this and this and this. And you have to be willing to hear that from your mentors. Also, just in the interest of transparency, in the public schools in New Mexico, it varies massively by geography. But in the state of New Mexico, a CF in our schools should be starting at about $70,000. That's working about 190 days, about 8 hours. It's going to vary dramatically. So if you're in New York or in Wyoming, find out what it is in your area. But just in the interest of transparency, that's where you start most of the time in the schools. I'm 6 years in SLP in the schools on a school salary schedule. I'm making about 90, 95. And I'm a little bit upper because of some stipends and some extra work I do, but just to throw numbers out there.
Thank you all so much for this amazing information on what students should be looking for when they're starting their process and what is really valuable to their experience. And with that, I would like to thank all of you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you feel more prepared to enter into this exciting next step on your way to becoming a speech language pathologist. Our panelists have generously offered to share their contact info in case you'd like to follow up with them individually, and we'll post that information in just a moment. We're about to post two important links in the chat. One is a quick survey so you can give us feedback about this event, and the other is a special link to the NISLA blog, which will show you all of the posts we have related to the clinical fellowship application process.
This was such a wonderful evening. So, in a moment, some slides are going to pop up, and these will have a quick look at National NISTLA's spring virtual events. Also, please see our virtual events page on our website to learn more, because we have some really great offerings coming up. The 2026 Asheville Virtual Career Fair is including two spring events, March 25th for speech language pathology and May 6th for audiology. Registration is not open yet, so be sure to save the dates and keep a lookout. More information will be available soon, and just follow the link in the chat. Additionally, ASHA has recorded previous conversations on supervision around clinical fellows specifically. So that can also be found at the link in the chat as well.
The National NISLA's Honors Program is open right now, and it is one of the many benefits of being a National NISLA member. Apply to be recognized yourself or recognize a peer or advisor. Remember that if you are in the class of 2026 or 2027, holding 2026 National NISLA membership is necessary for the NISLA to ASHA conversion discount. On behalf of National NISLA, we'd like to thank our panelists for offering their time and expertise. If you'd like to connect with any of our panelists, Katie or myself, feel free to screenshot this slide. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, SPG Therapy and Education, for supporting this event. This has been a wonderful discussion, and we'd appreciate your feedback. It's only with the help of our dedicated members that the CSD community continues to thrive. This conversation has been recorded and will be posted on National NISLA's social media accounts. Thank you and have a great night.